Ever since becoming a mom a year ago, I've started to pay more attention to the ways that we as a society talk about motherhood and careers, and I've noticed two main narratives. The first being that you can have it all, meaning that you can continue to have a career the way you used to once you become a mom. And the second narrative being that you have to give up your career when you become a mom. And I don't think either of these narratives are true. I don't think you can have it all. I don't think that you can have your career in the same way you used to once you become a mom. You only have 168 hours in a week and you have a limited amount of energy and something has got to give. I also don't believe that you have to give up your career if you do want to pursue a career outside of being a mom. Apart from neither of these narratives being true, my biggest problem with both these narratives is that they don't center motherhood, which is ironic because they are supposedly both speaking to motherhood. The narrative that you can have it all is assuming that motherhood in itself is not a fulfilling enough experience, that you need to pursue a career outside of motherhood to feel fulfilled. And the inevitability that you have to give up your career is assuming that motherhood in itself is not a career. I've had jobs continuously since I was 13, and I can say with such certainty that motherhood requires all of the skills that I have honed over the years combined while working under pressure, while trying to regulate your nervous system, while functioning on very little sleep and an unbalanced diet. Do you know a career path that requires the equivalent? Because I don't. And that's why I made this video today. I want to reframe these narratives. Firstly, by centering motherhood, by touching on the realities of having a career outside of motherhood while also raising a child. And by honoring the reality that motherhood has transformed my career path. I'm Kirsten, and I spend my days processing grief and healing while staying kind, cozy, and courageous. And today I want to talk about the ways that motherhood has healed my relationship to capitalism and made me a better entrepreneur. First things first, I want to talk about how the concept of this video was born. So I was rewatching Grey's Anatomy season 10, and there was this conversation where Cristina told Meredith that Meredith wasn't as good of a surgeon as Cristina after becoming a mom because Meredith wasn't as dedicated as Cristina to surgery. And I remember thinking to myself, I love you, Cristina Yang, but wow, you are so wrong. And I understand why Cristina Yang had that perspective, because if you're not a mom, it's very difficult to understand the experience of motherhood. Like, Cristina Yang was thinking about it as in,
I have 168 hours in a week, and I am dedicating 150 hours to surgery. Whereas Meredith also has to look after kids, so she is not dedicating as much time to surgery.
And therefore Cristina is always going to be ahead of Meredith. And I really do think a lot of people genuinely believe this, that moms aren't able to dedicate themselves to things outside of their children the way others who don't have children can. And I'm here today to break this down. Let's start with time. Yes, absolutely, we only have 168 hours in a week. If you think about somebody who has a full-time job, it does require the whole 168 hours to fully function. For example, 7 to 8 hours a night of sleep, 4 to 5 hours a day approximately cooking and eating, 2 to 3-ish hours every day commuting to and from work if you work in person, etc. I have calculated that it takes approximately 60 hours a week to raise a child. The reality of the situation is it is impossible to work full-time while raising children full time. And when I make this statement, I'm including moms who put their children in daycare while going to work full time, because you're still taking on the mental load of raising a child. You're also physically raising that child outside of daycare. You're working to be emotionally available for a child after already having worked a full-time job. So where is the time to take care of yourself? Where is the time to sleep? Where is the time to eat? Where is the time to connect with your family and friends outside of your child? There isn't. And that's why so many moms are struggling. Just because moms are working full-time and raising children full-time doesn't mean it's possible. Moms are just literally doing the impossible every single day. So how can moms have a career outside of raising their children? You can have part-time hours, or if you have a partner who is also working, the two of you can coordinate your work schedules so that they work during the days and you work during the evenings and the weekends, which is what my partner and I do. Going back to that Meredith and Christina conversation, now just because you are working less hours or different hours doesn't mean that you can't get the same amount of work done in those hours that you could if you were working a full-time job. Now, this is something moms are going to understand, but for those of you who aren't moms, here's an example. Let's say that you have to cook a meal for yourself, and usually you have an hour to cook your food. But something happened today and you got caught up, and now you only have 10 minutes to cook your food. Is it possible to still make sure that you are fed? Yes. You can order out, or you can cook instant ramen and add some protein and veggies and make it a well-balanced meal. The result in both those situations, where you're ordering food or cooking a quick 10-minute meal, means that you're still getting the food, even though you're not spending the entire hour making the food. Moms practice this skill of fitting an hour's work into 10 minutes of work every single day, multiple times a day. They are efficient, they are productive, they get the job done by any means necessary. When you're a mom, time is so precious. And I found that in my business, I'm so intentional about how I'm spending my time on my business, because I have such a little time every week to spend on it. That means that every decision I make when it comes to my business is a thoughtful one. I don't have the luxury to waste my time. Moving on to management skills. Because motherhood requires so much of mental labor, you have to calculate a million things every single day, and you're constantly having to update your calculations as your child grows. And sometimes you just don't have the same mental capacity you used to before having children. It is really easy to forget things on your to-do list. It's really common to overextend yourself and overbook your commitments. And in times like these, it's important that we have systems to support us through that. It could be an actual personal assistant, or if you don't have the funds for that, like me, I create schedules and calendars and to-do lists, and I have a bullet journal that I write in every single day. At the same time, the fact that moms are able to make those many calculations every single day mean that in some ways our mental capacity has expanded. We're not only keeping ourselves alive, but we're also keeping another human being alive. And in a lot of our cases, we're also keeping our households maintained. I often will reuse a lot of the systems that I've created for my motherhood journey in my business. So for example, when creating my babies and my schedule every single day, I leave a lot of buffer room, because something might come up for her that day and it might mean that things take longer than they usually do. And I want there already to be space in the schedule to reflect that. So let's say she's teething and mealtime takes an hour instead of half an hour. I've already blocked off a whole hour every single day for each mealtime. Similarly, when I block off time in my calendar for my business, I leave a lot of wiggle room because while I do have certain hours that I do like to work on my business, I'm also working from home and my baby is at home at the same time. So if something happens and I need to step in to take care of her for some reason, I want to make sure that there's already space in my schedule to do that. I don't want to feel anxious about getting back to work. If she falls down and needs a cuddle, I want to be able to be present with her and just focus on cuddling her and not have to think about all the things that I need to get back to when it comes to my business. This is one of my favorite ones, delusion. It is completely delusional to believe that you can work full time and raise a child. I'm not saying that moms still don't do it. It's just that it requires a certain level of delusion to believe that you can do it. Because as I mentioned earlier, it's impossible. And at the same time, incorporating delusion into your everyday practice can sometimes be the key to helping you figure out how to navigate having a career outside of motherhood. So for example, in my case, about 2 years ago, I quit my job and decided to start a business. I made a video about this that I will link, but I'll just give you the TLDR. At that time, I had $12,000 in my bank account, and I figured that I could stretch that to a year and that by the end of the year, my business would profit. In that time, I ended up getting pregnant, and my pregnancy was very difficult, and I wasn't able to keep up with my business, so I did not profit within a year. And then I had a baby and I had to take a break from my business. So once again, my business was not profiting. And now it's 2 years later and I still wouldn't say that my business is at a place where it gives me a livable wage. And I'm still here. I've found ways to make money to support myself while still pursuing my business. And even though it might not seem like the smartest thing that I could be doing right now, it feels right. And one thing that motherhood has taught me is sometimes you won't have all the answers, but when something feels right, it's worth pursuing. And this is where the delusion comes in. I believe that even if I don't have the money to pay next month's bills, I will figure it out. And I believe I'll figure it out because this feels like the right path for me. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to continue on this path. And I've always been pretty audacious, but I really feel like motherhood honed this skill of being delusional because there are so many moments when raising your baby that you don't have all the answers, but you just trust that you're going to be able to figure it out. This one is bittersweet. Connections. Something that I noticed as I stepped into motherhood is that I lost a lot of friends. And similarly, when it came to my business, I lost a lot of clients. Not directly, but indirectly. People who weren't willing to work with my pregnancy leave or my maternity leave after giving birth. People who had opinions about the fact that I brought my baby with me to work when there was nobody else to look after her. And that's a really shitty reality that a lot of moms have to navigate because people want moms to birth and nourish babies, but they don't want to have to support them through it. And at the same time, being a mom and raising a child brings you so many beautiful connections that you would have never had access to before. I've always worked in community, and I felt like I was pretty connected to community resources in our neighborhood. But I feel like once I had a child, I heard about so many new resources. And these resources also gave me connections for my business. So, for example, I visit drop-in centers with my baby. And at these drop-in centers, I meet a lot of other moms. And I've also started to build relationships with the people who work at these drop-in centers. One of the resources I provide as part of my business is a tiffin service. And if you're interested in learning more, I'll leave a link in the description. With my tiffin service, I like to prioritize serving people of color, and the staff and the clients at the drop-in center that we visit are all people of color. So it's a great space for me to share more about my business and gain customers. The final thing that I want to talk about, and this might be my favorite, is creativity. Now, while it is very true that oftentimes moms are so exhausted by the end of the day that they have no brain space to have a creative thought, my favorite thing to do, real talk, is to lie in bed and watch TV. That is currently my favorite hobby. And I think it's gonna be my favorite hobby until my baby has grown up and left our house. Because it just allows me to cozy up and not have to think too hard. And that is what my body and my mind craves. And because of that, I don't always have the energy at the end of the day to be productive when it comes to my business. I'd rather just rest. So, when do I get shit done? Well, I actually do a lot of the mental and emotional labor required for my business while I'm with my baby. So obviously I'm limited when it comes to my physical capacity while I'm with my baby, but I can still be open to finding inspiration and nurturing creativity while I'm with her. There are so many times that spending time with my baby sparks an idea for a YouTube video. Or even actually, I created a self-care kit for moms postpartum that I'll link in the description below. That whole concept was created because I would make space every day while I was with my baby to reflect on how I was feeling postpartum and how I could be supported more postpartum. And these reflections led to a resource that helps so many moms now. Since I started this discussion with Meredith and Christina, I'd love to return to it and talk about the ways that Meredith's motherhood journey has given her the time, the management, the delusion, the connections, and the creativity to be an exceptional surgeon. Throughout Meredith's motherhood journey, she makes time for research projects alongside her surgeries, working to change the future of medicine. Meredith often volunteers her friends to help with child raising. They organize parties for her children. They take care of her children while she's on trips. And they nurture her children's unique skill sets and interests. Meredith knows that she's not always the best person for the job. And it's important as moms to delegate the child raising. Our children need to be raised by multiple people for them to have access to varied perspectives. Delusion. There are times when I'm pretty sure Meredith has been in like 2 to 3 day surgeries. And in one of the episodes, she specifically credited that the image of seeing her kids is how she's able to stay on task for that long. Ever since Meredith has children, she forms bonds with other moms in the hospital, and they support each other through their motherhood journeys and also take turns taking care of each other's kids, which is essential for Meredith to be able to attend surgeries last minute. And then finally, creativity. There are so many times when Meredith's children give her the idea for how to approach a surgery in an unconventional way. I always find those moments really cute. And that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for sticking with me. If you're a mom, I hope this affirmed your experience. Whether you've decided to pause your career to raise your children, or to figure out how to have a career outside of raising children. And if you're not a mom, I hope you learned a thing or two. Having a career outside of raising a child is incredibly difficult. And it's possible as long as we're open to reframing what that career might look like. At the end of the day, I just want to get to a place in society where we're centering motherhood, not capitalism, when talking about motherhood. If you're interested in learning about how I navigate my motherhood journey, you can check these videos out. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.